Back to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Do you have any comments from the public? Seeing none. Do we have any amendments to the agenda for tonight?
No.
Did you want to amend for a short executive session?
Yeah, why don't we amend for a short executive session at the end? And if possible, would the board be interested in having a short conversation on scheduling an upcoming work session? That's for, we've had one on the kind of quasi-plan for July and August.
Are you asking if we're going to add that tonight?
I'm asking if the board is interested in having a short conversation about that tonight.
Sure.
All right, so we'll add that. Let's put that after the master planning and visioning. There's nothing else. We'll move to item 5, student representative report and announcements. Voice.
Guys, go ahead. Share.
Nothing. The school's kind of wrapping up.
Yeah.
So tomorrow's our last day of classes, and then we have a week of exams. And then tomorrow night, well, there's a lot of events going on, which all of you should have gotten, but also tomorrow night is academic awards night.
Nothing else to add?
That sums it up.
Sums it up. Yeah, school year's coming to an end.
So the high school does some really neat things. You know, they have, you've probably known Vince Masso is retiring. He's been a teacher here for 42 years. You've saw his retirement come by. But the students do a really neat thing. Actually, I think it's worth just noting. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, all the students in the building pretty much line up outside, you know, the retiring teacher's classroom. And after he finishes his class, you know, he kind of walks through a long hallway of students, and that's going to be at 2 o'clock tomorrow. So pretty special opportunity to see, you know, a teacher finish up. But pretty neat. Some announcements, they're in front of you. I would make note that it's always hard to dodge all of the meetings, but tonight is a middle school concert. It's just started, just now. In addition, there's a whole series of things here that are happening at all of the schools. Certainly the culmination is the June 10th graduation high school. And remember that all of you are invited. Don't know if you can make it or not. And we do have reserved seats for you. And would encourage you to get there a little bit early, although parking is not that bad, and they handle the traffic really quite well. So you don't have to get there extremely early. But anyway, so that's some of the many, many happenings that are occurring here now that we welcome in June. That's all I got.
Great. Any other announcements from board members?
I just wanted to note, I think we all got an invitation for a 5th grade presentations on the Rick Marcotte Central School History project.
Nice.
That went on. I think that's Friday from like 12:45 to 2:15.
Yep. I hope to be there as well. Thanks for the reminder. All right. Next on the agenda, we want to recognize Nerali Desai's service as our school board rep. So, Nerali, I'll ask you to come up if you don't mind. Easier for you. Thank you very much. And I'll read this. Put the plastic off. I put my old man glasses on. You were elected by your peers to represent them on the board of school directors. Your active participation and positive contributions during the past 2 years are evidence that their trust was well placed. Leadership and service qualities such as yours are assets to be valued throughout one's life. We thank you so much for sharing them with us.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if you're interested, but do you have any parting words you'd like to share with us?
Sure. Okay. I always reflect on my first days on the school board. My first ever school board meeting was at the meeting of the strike. And from then on, I just think this experience has been so valuable, and I've learned so much from working with so many different types of groups of people and learning to find my voice on a governing body like this. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your work. All right. Then we'll move right along to item agenda 7, city and school collaboration. So David and I did meet with Helen and Kevin, was it last Friday, I believe, right?
Yep.
Seems like,
A while ago.
yeah, time flies. So we had a good conversation. We talked about any updates they had on the city center. Nothing new since the last time we had talked. Spring of next year is when they're looking at potentially doing any work that would impact Rick Marcotte Central Space and the road around that. And then we talked a little bit about the neighborhood forums concept that we haven't read in much on. It's part of the city charter, and they're trying to utilize that to communicate with some of the neighborhoods, and so we heard a little bit what they're doing there. And then we provided an update on where we stand with master planning and visioning and shared what our work was there. Anything else, Dave, that you can think of?
No, I just thought that, the conversation about the neighborhood forums, we thought, that would warrant maybe some further conversation with the board around how we might partner in. That was, we essentially brought these items up with them, and we're just intrigued by some of the things that they're talking about. So that may be an opportunity similar to what we've done or are trying to do around voting participation from our voting districts. That might be a nice way to think about how to get out and be in those areas. So other than that, we also just touched on the Grand Isle piece a little bit with them, just to give them a little bit of an update around some of that as well.
Was there any conversation about the sessions that are going, or session that's going on Saturday? I forget what it's called.
It's like the kickoff.
The kickoff for the
Yeah.
City Center Collaborative.
Yeah.
You asked about that a
Yeah.
little bit, just to get some context.
Yeah, so that was also part of it. It's the South Burlington, it's what they call the SB3C. We don't need any more of those acronyms, but it's the South Burlington City Center Collaborative announces their launch event. So we asked a little bit more about that. It does have a governing board, it's a 501c3, and there is that kickoff event going on, so.
And where is it occurring? Where is it at the city?
I don't know, I'll let you know.
I think, I can find out.
I'll let you read this.
Is that city sponsored?
It seems like it's city-sponsored.
We have a member of the city council. Would you like to clarify for us?
Yeah, come on, Tom.
Hey, Tom.
Hello?
Blanchard is responsible for organizing, coordinating it, and I don't know if it's sponsored.
Okay.
I'm looking up the location right now.
Is it in there? Did you do a quick scan?
At City Hall, 575 Dorset Street,
Great.
9 a.m. to noon.
The other thing that I would share, the city council has created a work plan as well that's available on their website that we chatted about it just a little bit just to get some context about what it really meant. And the reason we asked about that was just to see if there was opportunities for things that they were working on that we wanted to line up that made sense. And neither David or I have had a chance to review that yet. I shouldn't speak for you, I haven't.
Well, just what we did the other day with them and to try to understand their colors,
Right, the color
the
scheme.
color
and all that,
scheming
yeah.
and what that meant. And
But we'll, you can get it on the website, but we'll send it throughout all the board members as well, or I'll have Delina do that, just so that you can all see it, but we haven't had a chance to look at that yet. And the only other thing that we brought up, I think, was technology or tools for that boards are using. So I know the city council is using Goodreader, and we're largely using email and paper. So we'll just continue on a kind of a low trajectory, see if there's an opportunity for us to use something a little more electronic than we're doing today. I know I use a tool in another forum that is a pretty effective tool for us, but those cost money, so see how that all plays out over time. All right, I think that's all we have on that topic. And then we have a new agenda item that we're going to be putting on a regular basis, just to update the community on negotiations with our various unions. So we wanted to start that tonight. So we've got 3 agenda items under there, just a quick updates, I believe. So Julie, do you want to provide the SBAA, or you want me to? An update on where we stand?
Ken?
Okay. So we've been in negotiations with SBA. Things are going well, I think, and we've got to a good understanding, and we're reviewing some documents now, and we'll have more to update soon. That's really where we stand. Any questions on that? All right. SBEA, who would like to take that update?
I think most people, we've talked about it before, but the healthcare benefit plans that we currently purchase through VHI, which is the Vermont Educators Healthcare Initiative, are going to be changing January 2018. So there will be 4 plans that are being offered, and if a district elects to use VHI as their healthcare plan provider, all 4 plans would be offered to employees. The other piece of the negotiation is that the board has delegated to Martin and I as a subcommittee to work with the SBEA negotiation team and be responsible for communicating back to the board and communicating board information to the association, and we have communicated that to the association leadership at this stage. I don't know if there's anything else.
Well, I guess I just added that it's kind of an interesting confluence of events coming up that statewide, almost essentially all districts are either already negotiating or will be negotiating because of this change in the healthcare plan. Pretty much everybody will be negotiating, so we are trying to push ahead earlier than otherwise because of the healthcare issue, because of the backlog that we're going to see of mediators, fact finders, and such, and are hoping to start sooner rather than later in negotiating with both the teachers as well as the staff. We've reached out to the teachers. We still need to reach out to the staff to try to initiate those negotiations.
Any comments or questions?
Just a quick question. I know, David, you were working with VHI to get some employee education sessions scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
And VHI has added at least one individual who came from Blue Cross Blue Shield as a full-time employee. They have engaged at least 2 or 3 other individuals to participate in providing training, particularly around in-service time.
Yes.
And I just wondered if there was any kind of calendar yet on employee.
So we do have a calendar. I did share that with Patrick. I can share it with all of you. I can send that out. Amity, myself, and Karen Dancher have been meeting to schedule. We do have a fair amount of things scheduled for next year,
Mm-hmm.
and kicking off kind of in-service or times when we think can be dedicated to the amount of time needed. So we're pretty good at the elementaries. We're still trying to find time and coordinate with VHI to do them at the high school and the middle school. So that's kind of as of late right now. So we're going to keep working on that to carve out with the principals when that time frame can be. Currently, as you know, a lot of our, any of our available time has been planned and programmed for professional development well into the future. So it's a little bit dicey. We may have to just have a whole separate session for those folks. That's not the only time, so we're letting people know about the website. We're doing a whole series of things, which you'll see in that calendar.
Okay. Anything else on agenda item 8 before we move on? Moving very quickly tonight. Superintendent's report.
I do not have a superintendent's report tonight.
Speaking of moving along quickly.
So brevity.
Really quickly.
Let's see if I have any questions for you on my notes before we let you off that easy. Hang on. Do you have any updates on the communications? We've asked you to reach out to the other
Yes, I did.
superintendents.
So when I went to Lake Maury, the superintendents were not available. So I thought the Burlington must be a lot busier than I am, but was not there. So I did push out an email. I'm waiting to hear back from them, indicating that if I don't get a response, then it will be between board chairs.
Okay.
So I'll keep you posted on, I expect that I'll hear.
Okay. Any other questions from the board members? You guys have any questions for David before you leave? Or I'll say your last chance, you can harass him about something. Okay. Administrative reports, fundraising.
So Joanna Bott is here, and those of you who don't know Joanne, this is Joanne Bott. And
Welcome, Joanne.
you probably know her mostly from the position of alumni. But earlier, I don't know when actually, we moved to add some additional responsibilities on fundraising. And Joanne has been doing an excellent job around really kind of shepherding and supporting the fundraising initiative. One of our main concerns, for those of you who don't remember, was that we had a lot of activities going on, and there wasn't necessarily any calendar that was happening specific to fundraising. So it could be potential that one elementary school could be doing something at the same time others are doing, or middle and high school are doing something, leaving our community feeling like, well, what's going on? Why am I getting, 5, I'm exaggerating a bit, but why am I getting, folks coming to my door, all in 1 or 2 or 3 days? So, again, there was a conscious effort administratively to come up with a better tool. An online tool was developed, actually, with the help of John, Alyssa McDonald, who else am I, what? Karen Dancher. So they did a beautiful job of developing a tool that actually is a Google Doc that can allow people to sign on and inform us about a fundraising event and forward it to their appropriate administrators. So here to talk to us a little bit about the fundraising and also answer any questions that you might have is Joanne. Welcome, Joanne.
Let me apologize, we're unplugged. I was supposed to be the prop guy and show you right from our website how this all works without any other props, but I think we have hard copies.
Right. So on the first page is the website. Basically, it just says what we're doing, and the is a Google Doc application to get approval for your fundraisers on there. Also some examples of different fundraisers, and then a little blurb at the end of why we're doing this. And then also at the bottom, we added the promotional advertising and solicitation guidelines. The district guidelines are also linked in at the bottom of that page. So you'll find the fundraising page on the top under students, staff, and parent drop down. It's under all 3 of those. So basically this spring, what I've done is try to meet with lots of different groups. I've been to all the elementary PTOs, principals, and then in the middle school, the assistant principal, the PTO, the high school. There's a lot of different smaller areas like TIE and CDC and the music department and all that. So I've been trying to go around and meet with them, and I've worked on getting people to start filling out the form to make sure the form works correctly. My goal is to have it 100% up and running by the fall. We're also going to create a district calendar, which will be also linked on this page, but I'm not going to do that till we get the new software up and going and all that kind of stuff. So that will be ready for the fall as well. Let's see, what else? There's an example of a couple pages of the Google Doc. I haven't really had any complaints about it. There's 4 different categories, and you only have to fill out the category that's necessary to you. Fundraising, there's a category for donations where you go out and ask people for donations. There's a category for accepting unsolicited donations, and there's a category for advertising, which would be the athletic banners or advertising and drama programs. So after someone fills out the Google Doc, what I do is I make this little chart in an email. I send it to the corresponding principal of the school, and they're supposed to have up to a week to approve it. And then once I get the approval from the principal, I email the person back and say it's been approved or disapproved. And then I just keep track of these. I have a notebook, and I also have them on my computer. Then I'll follow up after the event's over to find out how much money they raised or how much money they donated, how much cans of food they raised, how much blood they raised, et cetera, et cetera. And that's on this sheet, which is going to be the form that's going to either go to the business office or to you guys as well, I don't know. And it lists, these are the ones I've done so far in the spring. And you can look over this form and see if it has all the information that you feel is pertinent, and if there's more information that you feel that you need, I can add, different columns and that type of thing. But basically, it tells you what school it's at, what group is doing the fundraiser, the name of the fundraiser, whether it's been approved or not, the month and year it's taking place, the actual dates that they're out soliciting and selling candy bars or whatever they're selling. The ends policy, they have 4 choices on the Google Doc to pick for that, and that's what they've listed there. C stands for citizenship, long-time learning, personal development, and there's one other one.
Academic proficiency.
Yes. You know all those by heart. Then it tells you the funds that were raised. So there'll be, obviously, there can be a total at the bottom. I can also separate it by school. Where the funds have been deposited, and the funds that have been donated, and where they've been donated, the number of pounds of food that were donated, and where it was donated.
I just have a question on the report. So the APP, I think, is approved, that column?
Yeah.
So if it's blank, does that mean it is pending or it's not approved?
Nothing's not been approved yet.
Okay.
So everything's been approved so far. If it's not approved, I guess I would put an N or something like
Okay.
that.
And the other question I had when I was reading through this is, what is the criteria a principal would use to say, no, I don't approve this?
If they're selling something that we don't feel as a district want to sell, if we have to sign a contract with a third party that they might not want to sign a contract for.
Could be the activity.
Yep.
It could be from, the vendor or reputability of the vendor or past history. Could be the time of the event. It could be a certain time that's happening that may conflict with other activities that are going on in the school year. So again, those are, I mean, there's a series of other things that we know we've talked about around why we would and would not do that.
So, okay, so that's what I was really driving toward a little bit is, since it is principal approval, is there going to be consistency in what's approved and what's not approved based on, or is it pretty?
Well, part of that is because it's a document that they can all see, or they have knowledge, or Joanne has knowledge that there's activities going on and can communicate that accordingly. So if you're a principal at Rick Marcotte and
Right.
Martin's at Orchard, are you aware that there's 2 events going on at the same time? Is that going to conflict? Are you aware of that? So again, it's a much improved process from where we were not that long ago,
The Orchard principal, for example, the 5 that they have on here for next year already, he's approved them, but he also said he wanted to talk to the PTO about maybe changing some of the dates on a couple of them, so the dates might change around, that type of thing. But
Okay.
the fundraiser itself has been approved. Another big part of this, which isn't on here yet, is if someone wants to donate a piano to the school, we might not want the piano, so that would be disapproved, and anything worth a larger value has to be approved by the superintendent. So if someone wants to donate a car, we might not want the car, because we don't want to take care of the car, we don't need the car. That's another whole piece of this, besides the fundraising.
So do any targeted gifts go through you? I mean, even if they're cash gifts to the school for various reasons,
Well, the foundation's a separate thing where
Right.
we receive gifts. If a elementary school receives a large gift, sometimes it goes through the foundation.
Right.
So that would be separate sort of from this type of thing.
Okay. So I guess my question is, if someone wins, for instance, the Calcutta and gives the money back, does that go through this process?
If the boosters feel that, give me the total amount raised and they include that, it would be in the total amount raised.
Okay.
Yes. If they don't.
So the boosters aren't exempt from this. I mean, again, this is has been evolving, and so there's been some level of freedom, with the boosters in the past. They've done a great job. They've raised a lot of money. The ski sale, I mean, there's a whole series of things. But again, we're trying to be diligent about the money that's coming in and being able to make decisions also about how much money does come in. So, and that will be part of some further decisions when we look at annually, what are we talking about? How much money as we get into this in year 1 and year 2? And again, we've been, as Joanna said, we already have some practice with this, but we're
There's
going to
some
have more anecdotal
outside
data.
third-party groups, like the boosters, there's other groups like that a little bit that, I'm finding out about, or we're finding out about, we're trying to work with, and to me, it's sort of like making a relationship and having a trust value there, because some of them are a little not too trusting, you know, and like, like one of the PTOs said, oh, if you find out we make too much money, you're gonna take it away from us. And I'm like, no, we're not taking money away from you, and, you know, there's, you know, just little things like
Even though
that.
we explain what we're trying to do, it's still, there's some anxiety about that, but
So there won't be duplication of, for instance, selling the gold cards by the boosters and by the track team or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
You're gonna orchestrate that won't happen.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And then if anything, a major concern or something I think's, you know, value or something, I would definitely go to the business manager. Or the principal should, you know, whatever.
Right, good.
So do we have a full year of data yet?
No, we just started this in February.
Oh, okay.
And then, like I said, I don't even have all of them on here, I don't think, for this spring, because I'm sort of just letting people, much easier for me to find out what's going on in the high school, because I'm physically there, so if I see a flyer hanging on the wall, I pull it down, and I'm, oh, there's another one, and, you know, so I'm just going to the different groups, and the thing is, the high school, the kids are doing them. So that's 900 kids that could be doing a fundraiser, where at the elementary school, it's mostly just the PTO, so I only have to talk to the PTO and the principal, so, and every school's different. The middle school, everything's supposed to go through Paul, so I've met with Paul, and so it's just, every school's a little different, so. And then we have an annual form that's filled out by all the groups, and this form will mostly be done in the fall, but it lists all the new officers for that group, where their checking account is, their checking account number, who's the signer on the account as well.
Can an annual report of, you know, this, or review of this be within one of our I'm trying to think where it fits within one of our monitoring reports.
Either 2.5 or
2.5.
2.5 or 2.4.
Right. Yeah.
For the financial ones.
I think that would be a good place to put it so we don't lose it.
again, this has been an important, I mean, prior to the start of Joanne, we've had, we had a fair amount of things in place around validating and coordinating through a shared calendar. But yet there was still not a holder or an overseer of that work, of those approvals. So this has been a really nice next step for us, and certainly I think we also, we're going to be interested to see how much money is coming in, and what is the disparity between one school to the other school, and what is it going towards, and where do we need to be looking at that connected to, our budget development process.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway. Great.
Just one thing to add, because the internet or the smart board isn't working, that there's a link on there that has the process, procedures, which Joanne referred to. And the principals all know that, and you're continuing to put that in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that is where the consistency is going to be.
Sure.
In this position, what you've done so far has been the eyes and ears for the business manager, and it's so comforting because our office gets the money from student groups or athletic groups and that kind of thing, but it's always after the fact. It's already happened, and no matter how much we tried to, it wasn't quite the priority it needed to be without having some extra help. So
There's still potential, anytime there's activity going on in the fundraising, there's still potential for the exchange of cash. But, I feel like we're in a much better place currently. Joanne is very diligent and very observant of activities that are going on, and not afraid to call and say, I understand you're doing a fundraising. Again, it is about a relationship development, but it really is about making sure there's some accountability measures that are being enforced.
And John, you've made it clear the reason that we are doing this is to make sure these people feel comfortable in what they're doing and collecting money, and feeling that we're there to support them, and that they want to do the right thing. 99.9% of these people want to do the right thing.
Right.
So.
Great. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
All right. Which moves us into master planning and visioning. So we'll start with a quick update on the Grand Isle Supervisory Union Act 46 merger. Martin and I met with Nicole Mace at the School Board Association. Martin, how would you feel about providing a short update on that conversation?
Sure. The main point was to explore how the VSBA could assist, and they help in providing consultants and hooking you up with consultants, and whether we should be bringing in a consultant to assist us at this time. And the long and the short of it, without getting into too many of the details, because they're still a little confusing as far as what exactly is happening in Grand Isle, is I think she made a very good suggestion that we have one or two board members for the next few months attend their committee meetings, the Act 46 committee meetings, to get a better sense, because we've heard from different people with different stories about what they're planning on doing, to get a sense of where we might be fitting in before we pull the trigger on bringing in a consultant. Now, I don't know if you had a chance to get when those meetings were, to get back to that, or?
The next one after our conversation with Nicole was last night.
Oh, okay.
So I did reach out to Andy.
So you went to that, right?
I contemplated going to it, let's just say that. But I did get an update from Andy, who is the chair, I believe, of that committee, and he said they had a good meeting last night. And let me look at my notes here. So they're making progress on another option, because they want to have a backdoor option in case this doesn't work out, I believe, but I don't want to speak for them directly. But I think it's more based on school choice and potentially doing I'm not sure what technical the words are, but kind of having a combined district up there, and kids would have, I think 6th through 7th would have, or 7th and 8th would have school choice.
And high school as well, or?
What's that?
Through high school?
I believe so, but I wasn't clear from his note that that's
Seemed like that's what it was.
It seemed like that's what it was.
It was choice, middle through high, and they were going to do some sort of a reconfiguration or something
Right.
for their elementary.
Right.
Again, I don't exactly know what the terminology they're, or the category they're trying to go under, whether it's side by side. I don't
Right.
think that necessarily then fits, but.
Yeah, and just for the sake of making sure that I've said this out loud, I think the last conversation we had with them was that some form of having students in the high school area come to South Burlington and the elementary school stay in the Grand Isle County, but we would oversee that physical school if we wanted to do this with them. So the early conversation was we thought they were asking us to absorb students into our elementary schools. That is not a model that they're considering. So we got to dismiss that one out of their minds. So they're still working through it, and they're apparently making good progress on working together. But I agree. I think getting up to some of their meetings and hearing it firsthand and engaging with them is probably a good use of our time.
So did you suggest that to, what'd you say his name?
Andy.
Andy, sorry, to Andy.
This was an email, so I didn't get back to him yet.
They're public meetings, and I would
Right.
assume they'd actually welcome having somebody there.
How often do they meet?
I think it's once a month, but don't quote me on that. It's on. They have their own website, so I can send that link around. Or you can go to the Vermont School Board Association's website, and you can link to it from there. They have a link to all the Act 46 related committees in the state, of which there's very many.
And I would assume that the same board member from us wouldn't necessarily have to go to all of them, but just
Right.
have some presence.
To
I'm
do-
happy to go up if I happen to be in town, so.
Well, why don't we do this? I'll at least make it from a formal perspective. Either David or I will look at there, find out what the next committee date is, and then we'll have Delina send it out and see who's available, just so we don't leave it to chance. Okay. And then the other question I think in my head on that same front was just, and I don't think we need to answer it tonight, but I want to make sure we don't lose track of it, is just the pure kind of capacity question of both the board and the administration to tackle on one more task to kind of into this complicated set of conversations. So I just want to be thoughtful about doing that, or not doing that, as we get more information, so. Yes?
So at the last meeting, we talked about the school choice that they have now in Grand Isle, and how the kids can go to Essex, Colchester, Milton, Linden, New York, and
Yep.
here.
Yep.
So if it was a captive market for South Burlington as part of the consolidated school district, what what, relative increase in percentage would you see in those, in the number of kids coming to the high school by itself?
Yeah,
High school.
David should probably answer this, but I think there's about 50 coming now. I think there'd be about 173 total available to us if they consolidated with us.
How many are coming now?
About 50, I think. Is that
So
right?
from 50 to 173? Or is it the other way around?
No, 50, we have about 50 coming now. Is that fair? Or I got that right?
Out of Grand Isle, we have more than that.
It's over 100?
Yeah.
Okay. I had that one wrong.
Remember, we have a combined close to 180 now.
Yeah.
But not all are coming out of the islands.
Right.
About
Oh,
80 out
I
of,
think it's 80.
80 out of,
80 out of the other.
Okay.
it's about an 80 split probably
Okay,
between
okay.
Georgia and here.
And 173.
Yeah, so 173 is the total, 6 through 12 available in all, so this goes like this, Patrick.
Yep.
But,
I have one number right. You don't.
yeah, you did.
Okay.
You got it right on.
50%.
Very perfect.
That's not proficiency.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so again, these are the 5 communities: South Hero, Isle Lamont, Grand Isle, North Hero, and
Albert.
Albert, right.
Okay. So the next step on that is really just for us to attend a meeting and I think maybe get an update from Andy about what they'd like to see from us next. We have not taken action to apply for a grant.
We have not. I haven't, I reached out to VSA, who has some folks in concert with VSBA, I'm assuming, and they identified 2 individuals that are open or were available. When I was down at Lake Maury, I ran into her and we had a conversation, and I updated her that we were where we are, looking at kind of next steps and trying to understand the complexities of the Grand Isle desire and wants and where we are at, so.
Is this the type of question where the school board would recommend, could recommend against the consolidation because it just didn't make any sense? Or is it the type of
Sure.
situation where it always goes to the voters because?
No, it doesn't have to, Tim. It's really, again, part of the due diligence that's happening here by the board is to ascertain what the request is, what's the want and desire of the board, and if we pursue it, then obviously the board could elect to say we continue to move forward and it would go to the electorate. That's the requirement for each of those individual communities in the islands. They would have to do the same thing. So
This board could say we don't want to pursue it.
Yeah, I don't think we're obligated to bring it to the
And
voters.
it would just die right there.
I think that's true.
no requirement.
Any other questions or goals or objectives from the board on this topic? It feels a little bit like we're just kind of waiting a little bit longer to see how they move next. Are we comfortable with that position right now as a board?
I was under the impression there were some deadlines to submit relative to kind of declaring you wanted to participate in a merger activity.
There are definite deadlines. I mean, they have, I think, June of 17, they have to have, so you gotta then vote, but then they've gotta back that up so many days to have a vote. So there's definitely some timelines that are in play. I'm not necessarily educated enough to know exactly what the different versions of the merger options they're trying to go under, and if they are different than the ones we've listened to them before, if there's different timelines in play. So there's no question there's timelines.
But those timelines apply to both parties, right?
Well,
Yeah, I think so, we're fine if, over the summer, the next 3 meetings, I guess, if they're meeting once a month,
Yeah.
kind of understanding what's going on. We're not behind the 8 ball if we really wait until fall to get a consultant, if we decide to do that, was my last name off the top of my head, who's their kind of expert on Act 46, will come and explain that and bring us up to speed, because frankly, we have not needed to focus on that because we were not the type of school district that it was really aimed at, but now we're being asked to participate. So we can bring her in and give her however much time we want to educate us on those kind of issues as well. I don't know that we would want to do it.
Yeah, I think that's
Until
right. I thought
later
I
in the
remembered
summer.
something about the fact that we wouldn't, if they've already done a study committee, we wouldn't have to. And that was, there's a timeline for forming study committees, but I don't think we would have to form a study committee.
Correct.
Because they've already
That
had
was
one.
my
So I think that was one of the earlier deadlines that I think we don't have to worry about it. Yeah, so I think that is something we could target a date to have Nicole or Nikki join us to give us a briefing. There's no harm in that. People want to have that, try to get scheduled.
Sure.
Probably a little bit later in the summer so we can see how
The
the
July
dust
or early
settles
August,
because.
the July meeting or the early August meeting?
Well, it'd be nice to have at least attend a couple of their meetings to
right,
see where their
right.
thinking is going.
Yeah, I mean, if the dust settles and they really aren't interested, then we don't have to spend the X amount of time coming up to speed on something that is not that relevant to us.
So just to be clear, I mean, every entity that has 900 or less students are in this place of pressure that they have to, are being forced to do something. Now, that something could be establishing a study committee and having some outcome of that work that then gets referred to the Secretary of Education to say, this is where we're at. If they're very close in their numbers to 900, then it's likely going to have some consideration, my guess. If they're well below the 900, then, that plays out differently. And so that's part of some of the push or not push to bring resolve to this. So again, we don't have the pressure other than the fact that if everyone in our similar positions that are larger districts, everyone says no, then nobody has the opportunity to do a joint. And again, that doesn't mean that small can't join either, but certainly the larger districts are put in this place.
Yeah, I think the sooner we can get to one of their meetings, and maybe I'll reach out to Andy again and just to confirm there's not a timeline pressure that they're feeling. Because I know at one point they wanted to, I think they were talking about a model where everybody had remained having school choice at the high school level as the fallback. But they were classifying that, at least in the conversation I had with him, as their fallback, and the model with us was still their preference at that time. And if there's a timeline when because I know when that committee first came in, they were a little concerned about timing. They wanted us to get back to them relatively quickly. So
They were.
just out of respect, I think we should confirm that.
Yep.
So I'll reach out to Andy to confirm both the meeting and if there is a time pressure on their end, so that we can be respectful of that.
Just one final, somewhat related. Last night, PBS NewsHour had a segment about Act 46 in some schools in Vermont, and I recommend it to you. It's short of 5 minutes. It's at minute 36 approximately. It's a nice introduction.
Any comments from the public on this before we move along? And then community meetings and next steps on our master planning and visioning. Visioning, sorry. One thing that I forgot to bring up last time that I wanted to make sure we talk about tonight was some number of months ago we had a request to at least consider a health survey as a result of possibly moving schools or consolidating schools or any of these changes. At that point, the board, I think, although we didn't take formal action, didn't see the need for that. I just wanted to check in again. I've had that group reach out to me, and I told them I would at least engage the board in a conversation on that.
Actually, that kind of goes right into one of the questions or issues I wanted to bring up tonight, and that is jumping a little bit ahead. I mean, we've received some information from David regarding educational benefits, including some aspects of safety in the schools, which addresses primarily noise issues at Chamberlain, and also there was some backup documentation which I've had a chance to look at, and we also are in the process of talking with is it the FAA that has the
Yes.
regarding potential funds for mitigation of noise mitigation at Chamberlain. But as I thought about this and as I looked at the data, I mean, we really have, we have the environmental impact statement, we have the overlays of where the soundscape is, et cetera. But as far as the impacts at the school, all we have is anecdotal evidence as far as whether it impacts or not. And I've gotten different stories. And in fact, back at the time when we commented on, the school board commented on the environmental impact statement, I went there and talked to folks, primarily Holly, and it was essentially, well, it's not a big issue. You know, you stop talking for 15 seconds to 45 seconds, but we don't see this as an issue. But now I've also heard that, yes, for perhaps some special needs students, it might be a bigger issue. But the bottom line is that it's all anecdotal. So I think there's a couple steps we need to take with respect to Chamberlain, whatever we decide. And that is to get a better basis for really what are the current impacts from the current noise and what can we expect. And that may mean bringing in a consultant, which, you know, comes back to these folks, if they would be able to address that aspect of what's going on at Chamberlain with respect to health impacts or learning impacts from the noise. Because also the data, you know, the reports that are out there are not really conclusive that, you know, there's a study that was done near major airports in Europe, and it was not conclusive that it was negatively impacting student learning. Some parts possibly. So the data out there is not definitive, and what we are hearing is anecdotal. And I think if the folks from Department of Health can help us on that, getting something a little more definitive, I think we should follow up. And if not them, I think somebody else, because that's really, I think, the first step is to really nail down whether there is an issue that we really should be dealing with. And the second, going on at the same time, is to be working with the FAA to find the mitigation funds if that's appropriate. So.
Anyone else?
Remind me again what the timeline was for that survey?
How long would it take?
Yeah.
I don't think we ever got a clear, I don't recall seeing a clear duration. Do you remember, David?
I thought there was a work plan that was reasonably long, yeah?
Yeah, I want to
I
say
think it was pretty long.
again, they do a lot with, you know, it's like they go around. I want to say 3 to 4 months is what I recall. Maybe that's even.
I thought it was longer than that.
That was a lot longer than that.
Yeah, like a year.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was like 14 months is what
Yeah.
I had in my head. That was over a year. And that's why, yeah, it sounds to me like something that could be, if that really is the timeline, like if it really is like more like a year or 14 months, I think it could be something that's extremely useful for the Chamberlain school, whether we hold up the whole master planning and visioning process to hinge on, you know, what the answers are that come out of that. That seems like an enormous delay, you know, 14 months added on to this process is a very long time when a lot of people are waiting on maintenance, we're waiting on a lot of things. So the question is what we would do with that information, depending on what it told us, and whether that would really help us decide whether or not to close that school.
Well, and I think what, Martin, you're suggesting is we have the noise envelope information already, and we sort of know where Chamberlain falls into that. I get the impression it's almost more of an professional opinion around, you know, the health of elementary age kids in this environment. That it's not requiring survey work as much as it's saying, here's the location, here's the airport, here's the noise level as defined, here, you know, here's some definitive not recommendations, but observations.
Well, and the noise, just looking at the noise envelope may not be sufficient analysis either, because it's the duration, it's when the noise is occurring, it's, you know, how often is it when kids are actually in school, you know, because if they're measuring on a 24-hour basis, a big time period for flights taking off from South Burlington is between 5:30 and 7:30 in the morning.
But I think the data exists from the airport and the guard to
When those times
inform
are.
an expert around.
And I would want an expert to delve more deeply than, you know, to really understand if that data is sufficient to make that call is essentially what
So
I'm
I guess
saying.
my point,
Yeah.
Patrick, is that I don't see the proposal as outlined by the Public Health Department as being necessary to our process as they proposed it. If there's expertise that resides there that can
Inform
do the
them.
work Martin's suggesting, maybe they are a good outfit to do that, but it would be much more, the guardrails would be a lot tighter on it. And I don't know that they have that unique expertise either.
And the timeline would have to be much more aggressive.
Then
Well, the
what we
problem is there's
call-
only
yeah.
10 days left of school, so
Right,
I
yeah,
don't
with
think
no
it's,
students there.
it's not
Yeah.
going to be something that's going to be actually in the school with observing students, presumably.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is if we took Chamberlain off just for a second and as an isolated conversation, if that were not there, would the board be interested in engaging in a health assessment for the entire master planning and visioning process? Or am I hearing that if there's an opportunity to get some expertise as it relates to the Chamberlain noise, then we should look at this opportunity, but that would be the scope that we would be comfortable with at this point?
I mean, I don't think we need it for the master planning and visioning, but I don't see any reason why we shouldn't take them up on doing this, because, if we decide to, whatever the configuration is, we're going to have schools that we're going to be keeping, perhaps all 5.
Yep.
And we may as well go ahead and establish that baseline, as we are going to be seeing changes over the next number of years with development in city center and the airport expansion, et cetera, et cetera. So, and if it's something they are willing to do and it's not going to cost us something, it could be valuable information.
I agree with you, but I worry about what kind of drain that is on our already burdened administration in terms of
Right.
what participation they have to have in that process.
Right.
I have to say, when I looked at the examples they gave and looked at their methodology and approach, I did not see it of being of value to the district at this time. So I would not recommend pursuing it from my standpoint.
I mean, I don't have a strong feeling about that. I mean, you probably have looked more in depth than I have, but
Just looked at it.
so I'll defer to you this time. If you
Yeah, I think
defer to
if-
me next time.
If the timeline is as long as we think it is, it would, even if it were valuable, it would be a distraction from some of the conversations.
True. Yeah,
A little bit.
that's
That
another
would be
negative.
a little dangerous.
My other concern was someone else can correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that we would have been one of the earlier districts to sort of participate in something like this. I think there's possibly value in it at some stage, but I'm not sure, given what we have on our plate, that we want to be the test case for it, given master planning and visioning and potential consolidation discussions and every other thing that we have David working on, in addition to running 5 schools, so, yeah.
Doesn't mean, as you said, you can't do it at some point
Right.
in,
Right.
Right.
in time forward either,
Right.
So we'll reach back out to our
Another
contact there and have a conversation around Chamberlain and an update on what we just talked about when the full master planning and visioning. And either I'll get back, or depending, they may want to come back and present themselves about Chamberlain or something, so we'll see how that plays out once I have a conversation. All right. I've got a number of other kind of sub-points on my notes here about master planning and visioning, but do other people have things they want to talk about under this category?
Well, I think you were leading into the community meetings and next steps.
Yep.
And I know I don't know where the consolidated feedback is yet.
It's in my
but-
briefcase right now. It's not all consolidated yet, but there I have the pile of, Delina was very helpful. Thank you very much for pulling that together on such short notice. At the end of last week, I sort of said, can you pull everything together so we can start to consolidate it so that we can post the consolidated information online so everyone can see it. But then we can also have some kind of summary that we can start to use to actually start to understand what we think we heard from the community.
And I also think we had made an effort to assign sort of who would respond to certain
Yeah.
questions on the FAQs, but I don't know if that work has started yet. So but those to me were some of the natural follow-ups to the community meetings.
Right. So I know we drafted names for the questions the first time around. Should, at this point, I don't know if anybody's been tasked with actually assigning them. I think we got the names. we want to wait till we get this updated version and then dole them all out at once? What's the time frame for having these final consolidated, do you think? I'm not trying to hold you up to a date. Just,
I probably need a week to sort of get everything pulled together, realistically.
So can we target realistically the mid-June meeting to have those on our tables with names and actually get them assigned? Is that realistic?
I think that's realistic.
Okay. Did I mention I'm not going to be at that meeting?
Well, I know who's going to be.
Yeah, I know. I just got really scared.
Patrick, you've gotten a lot of additional work.
Let's do a quick update. Update on where we stand on those. Who would like to go for it? You started talking a little bit.
I already started.
You're already talking.
We've kind of been back and forth with getting information and sending questions to David. He's, I know, answered questions. I haven't had a chance to look at the answers yet. So we're in the process, of really making sure we understand the educational benefits of the different configurations. It's still going to take some time because there's background reading, there's information. I'm sure I'll come back with another set of questions after. It'll be an iterative process, but I think we're making progress to make sure we understand fully.
And on the financial side?
On the financial side, we spent some time digging into the model and sort of formulated some questions, both for Stephanie, which I've not passed on to Stephanie yet, and then questions that we had for John and his team, John and Annette primarily, about some of the inputs to the model. Overall, it seems like the model is structured in a reasonable way. I will say it is very focused on what you would expect it to be focused on from White and Burke, that it's a real estate model, really. And the inputs that came from the district they can be changed, but there's no build-up from, for example, enrollment numbers up to how much capacity we need, and then therefore driving any other numbers in the model. The enrollment numbers are in there more for summary data, for sort of, per student data that would be an output of the model, but it doesn't really drive any changes in the model. And so basically the questions we had for John and Annette were really to sort of dig in a little bit deeper from the hard-coded inputs that Stephanie had in her model to really make sure that we understand why those numbers look the way they do. So they're providing me with a bunch of backup spreadsheets and things. So I think there'll probably, as Martin said, with the educational side, there'll be another set of questions that kind of come out of that. And I wanted to see also, after we sort of talked to John and Annette, whether some of these questions I have for Stephanie can really be answered before we get them to her. I don't want to spend a lot more of her time and money on this if we don't have to. And so I'd like to make sure those are really concise and clear. And I think what probably makes sense is after I get this next batch from John and Annette to sort of revise those questions, refine them a little bit, and sort of send them around to make sure that there are no other questions from other board members to add on to them before we send them off to Stephanie. I don't know. I don't think at this stage I feel like we need a whole lot more time from Stephanie sitting in a room working on a model. The model's very flexible and we can play with assumptions and change things that we want to change pretty easily. And her expertise is really, and their expertise as White and Burke really seems like it's in the model. So I think more it's going to be questions for us about what we believe about some of the assumptions that are in the model and what those lead us to believe about the overall costs of each of the options. So yeah. That's right. One question, just to circle back before we move on, about community meetings and next steps, was just how I didn't know if it was appropriate to poll everyone how we're feeling in terms of, do we feel like we've had enough, and do we feel like we had discussed a survey before? Do we feel like that's someplace that we need to go? Do we feel like we're getting a clear sense? Not that we need to report out on what that clear sense is if we feel like we have it, but whether we feel like we need a lot more information from the community or whether we're feeling pretty good and now it's time to go into analysis mode and sort of decide what we're doing with that feedback. I'm happy to go first. which is, I feel like we got some good feedback. I mean, I feel like we got some pretty clear feedback from a pretty wide group of people. We had, my count is that we have about 145 of the feedback forms back. I think some more could potentially trickle in, although people are a little shy about turning them in one at a time, so maybe we'll only get emails from people who are really passionate in one way or another. I did sense maybe a little bit of fatigue toward the end on the meetings, because we had great participation in the March meeting. We had pretty good participation in Chamberlain. Very little participation in Central. There was good participation, but it was very limited in terms of numbers. Orchard was okay, somewhere in between Central and Chamberlain in terms of numbers. And it did sort of seem like we were starting to see some of the same faces at different meetings. So I'm starting to feel a little bit like we've heard from the people who want to speak up. And obviously we'll keep taking emails and phone calls and all of that. But I'm not sensing that there's a great demand for a lot more community meetings or outreach in that way.
So I know early on we were kind of taking that data about the kind of the quote-unquote demographics about people, putting in that spreadsheet. Take a look at this. We should probably get that
Yeah.
Redistributed so that we can be sure that we're not missing one constituent base. I know.
We're still going to have the issue. I can tell before we even plug in every single number from the last couple of meetings, we're still going to have the issue of it's mostly homeowners, it's mostly people with time to come to the meetings. So, it's potential that we're still missing some folks.
What about the population of people without kids at school?
That's tricky because I feel like we've reached, we did spend some time with the seniors. David and I went and met with a group of seniors who do the Young at Heart lunches, which was great. And I feel like at least, and this is only anecdotal because I haven't analyzed this data thoroughly, I feel like at the last two meetings at my table, there were some people in a different demographic than, just parents. And in reflection, actually, that was true at Chamberlain as well. Even the first, sort of smaller community meeting, I actually felt like those meetings, a lot of them were non-parents. Central, I would say we had parents at the table, and there were a couple of parents at Orchard as well. I guess maybe it was 50-50 at Orchard, but I felt like, at least anecdotally at my tables, it felt like there was good participation from people. A lot of them were people who had children at some point in the district, but
Right.
whose children were grown or who were out of the district. And certainly from the seniors, there was a big emphasis on, what's this doing to our taxes, and not so fussed about, the actual in-school issues.
And property value.
Yes, and property values, taxes and property values. Yeah, the big challenge is we're not seeing renters, and that being said, though, I do feel like we had some decent representatives from Chamberlain at some of those community meetings, and we were worried about missing Chamberlain because there were so few that filled out forms from the March meeting. Not to say that they can speak for the whole neighborhood, but I don't feel the neighborhood was not represented in the process, which I was a little bit concerned about at the outset. It was not as well represented, perhaps, as some of the other neighborhoods.
I guess, we're not, I don't think we're trying to get a statistically valid idea of what the community wants, because we would have to hire an expert to actually get that done.
Yeah.
It is to make sure everybody has had the full opportunity to voice their opinion and to give us input to inform our decision. And then, we'll make the decision, and if it's to sell a school, that's when, obviously the community will have their vote at that time. So I think the question is, have we gotten the word out sufficiently? Have we offered enough various times, various methods for people to be able to feel that they can be heard and can give us input? And I don't know what else we can do. We have advertised these meetings. We've asked for input. I think, have we not asked for input in the front porch forum? I think we have. But, so people are aware and have had their opportunity. It's been in the other paper, obviously, as well. So I feel comfortable that I think we've fully given folks an opportunity to weigh in, and now it's time to kind of roll up the sleeves and come up with something. And there's going to be more opportunity, presumably. Presumably, it's once we've gone through this, at some point, we're going to have this on the agenda for a discussion to lead up to our decision, and we'll make sure that the community understands that that's going to be happening, and they'll have an opportunity to weigh in then as well. So.
Any comments from the public?
Question?
Yeah.
Can you tell me how much the district has spent on White and Burke up to this point?
Approximately $52,000.
52?
Yes,
So
that's, and, because I noticed that there was one more small check from the last little round with Stephanie, but it was right at 49 something. And then we had Stephanie come 2 weeks ago to give us the first draft of her final report and to take us through the financial model, and that was another couple $1,000s. And then we probably will need to we'll probably need to have one more session with her, I would guess, before she produces the final report that would be shared with the public and all of that from the process.
So you don't anticipate moving into a second contract phase that would then exceed $100,000, or?
Not, I can't speak for the whole board. From a financial modeling perspective and the work that they've done so far, not unless we decided, I think, that we were going to really move forward with an option that would seriously change the configuration. I could be wrong. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe.
I don't think we can predict that future yet.
Yeah. But there's nothing on the table right now that says over the summer we're going to be spending another $50,000 with White and Burke to do more analysis or anything like that. Like I said, I think the financial model pretty well reflects their opinions of value of the properties and their views on what different configurations would require in terms of costs and all of that. So I don't know that there's a lot more to draw from them until we get to a next level of decision-making, so.
Martin touched on this a little bit earlier about the FAA or the airport providing some funding for the noise mitigation at Chamberlain. Is that like an open-ended conversation, or do we have an idea of when we'll have a feeling if that's going to happen or not, or what that money will look like?
David?
I don't really know. I mean, we've initiated that conversation, and they have consultants that are back to us, or representatives of the FAA who handle this particular part 150 of this noise mitigation process. I don't know exactly the timeline or the responsiveness of these groups. I mean, we're going to stay on top of them, and we think we would like to know what types of measures could be for sound mitigation and what might be options for cost deferment to go towards, other scenarios. We do know that it is in an area that is very much identified as a strong potential site for noise mitigation, noise enhancement, and that is changing structures, increasing window, from double to triple, increasing insulation, up to including fully air conditioning in a school, and then, as I said earlier, actually money to go towards moving the school.
So, David, can we follow up with them before the next, can we try to follow up?
Well, I
before the
have
next
contacts, I have things out to them, both the airport management, both the Gene Richards and his assistant have been very helpful and responsive to me around helping. If I don't get a response, I go to them, and they seem to really assist. I've used them a couple times already. So,
So you feel you have access to the appropriate expertise who can be advocating for us? I mean, is that what Gene Richards' position is, or is he the holder of the money?
No, they are not. The airport is not. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but from what I understand, from what I've been shared thus far, is that I'm in touch with the right people who would then have to look at the more in-depth study of the sound envelope or the noise envelope, and to make determinations based on that, probably getting at some of what you're talking about, Martin, around what are the inside and outside sounds measurements, inside and outside, and looking at the variable between those two.
So are they doing that now?
They're not that I know of, no. But that's what needs to happen in order to, I think, further that. Unless the sound study that's been done that you've all seen that was published did some of that, in that location, and I'm not aware of that.
So I'm sorry, I'm just not clear on what we're waiting for at this point.
Waiting for the FAA to engage in giving me some sort of a decision, a recommendation on where we're going to go from here. Application,
I see.
process, on-site visit, what, And I don't want to be dragged into the federal government slowness, I'm certainly well aware of that, so.
Well, that's what I'm just wondering, if there's some expert, some advocate who can help us with this
I
process.
think we definitely can go to congressional folks too, and I've talked about that with Gene a little bit. If we need to push a little bit, we can. This particular airport is high on the priority for the services that it provides, and they feel like they will be.
I think that probably would be a good, quick step. I mean, to get a hold of our congressional representatives. I mean, I don't know if who we should start with, whether it should be Peter Welsh or Leahy. I mean, they're all very much in support of F-35s, and that's our hook for them. Saying, well, then help us out here.
Yeah. So again, I mean, in part, I want to say that where have I been on this prior to to now? We're a month and a half in, right, or whatever, when I made the call. So part of that is, I think they've been responsive. I don't want to let too much more time go. I think by week's end or the first part of next week, if I don't, then we're going to start pushing some other buttons. Could include some of you helping to advocate, up to including our congressional folks to say, we need some answers, and certainly can provide them with, that noise envelope map and some of the complexities that we're trying to deal with. And, time is of the essence. So I get it. I've definitely put some effort towards trying to get this in motion. I appreciate that help and idea.
Okay, so you'll push on that by the end of the week, early next week, if you don't hear back, and then we'll come back next meeting and see how that's going. Okay. So the only other item I had under community meetings and next steps is really just starting to think about if we are to the point where we can start thinking about putting a timeline together of the decisions and recommendations. It feels like we're getting close. We've got the two committees that are still working. So maybe at the next June meeting, we can talk about a potential timeline, or is it still too early?
I noticed that you're loading that June agenda that you're not going to be here for.
And?
Just making an observation. I just wonder if you would like to be in on that conversation.
I probably would. I may be able to be there late.
Okay.
I don't know if people have I'll just leave it out there. If people want to, we can talk about it in the June 15th meeting, or we can talk about it now.
I think we need to see the result of the committees before we can make a timeline.
Yeah, but I also think that we shouldn't be planning on really having the major discussion until September, because so many people have various schedules in the summer and are not necessarily here. I think
we can have some preliminary discussions though before that time, and develop a timeline that goes out to the public before or as they're returning from their summer break.
I see an agenda for our work session being formed. That's what I see happening right now.
I can see putting the timeline on. We just may not be able to commit to one yet, but I think it's fine to have it.
Okay. So we'll come back to that in a second when we get to the time. So the only other thing I wanted to touch base, David and I had a communication with Stephanie from Whitenburg. I think the public presentation of their work and their report we're going to target for the July meeting. We have one meeting in July on the 13th, I believe. So we've asked Stephanie to join for that. The agenda for the July 13th meeting. Anything else on the master planning and visioning? The public? Okay. So that brings us to the work session that we added to our agenda. So we have on our work plan to have a work session, I think, in either July or August timeframe, or is it August or September? Sometime coming up relatively soon. So I wanted to just start thinking about what agenda items. I think we just touched on one, perhaps working through some details, because I expect the master and planning and visioning work that the two subcommittees are doing are really both so the board can understand those factors and so that we can share them with the public. So I'm assuming there's some degree of a public presentation that will be coming out of all of that in some form, whether it's just us discussing it in public or not. Well, I'm assuming most of our work session we want to target for master planning and visioning. Are there other things that we need to make sure we put into that? Or is that assumption wrong?
It's a good assumption.
When are we going to talk about ends monitoring again? Metrics for ends and getting,
You could put that into that
Into
work
that.
session. Yeah. Coupled it together.
Yeah. So master planning and visioning, and see, we could talk about ends monitoring.
I'd also like to, maybe not have a long discussion, but a little discussion about budgeting process for next year.
Budget prep.
Mm-hmm.
As much as this pains me to say, just because John's sitting here, do we want to invite the new John to that conversation? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Well, it depends on when you do it. He may be on, depends on if you're going to do that in the month of June or in July, he'll
Yeah.
be here. So,
Right, I'm thinking, that we were talking about July or August timeframe.
yeah, so he'll, I would certainly include him.
So can we have, I hate to point Delana out, but can we have either Delana or Meg or somebody send out a meeting or emails to get dates to get, that might be workable for people?
Yeah, so can we kind of focus in on that a little bit? Are we looking at June and July, or July and
I
August?
think we're looking July and August, not June.
Because you only have one
Yeah.
meeting in July.
Okay.
Or either, times to avoid or
means
dates.
I have to decide what I'm doing this summer.
All right, so let's do this. By the next week or so, if the board members could send like blocks of time that they're definitely not around
Yeah.
to Delina, and then she'll take that and send back possible dates, and then we'll react to that in
We
detail.
can send out like, just an email to respond to, so we can.
Do
That's fine,
we,
whatever.
do people know their calendars enough to say we can target in the last 2 weeks of July?
The last week of July works for me, or something close to the board meeting, because my family is going to be in Massachusetts. I'm literally thinking, since it's White and Burke and some other things, I might come back specifically for the board meeting to be here in person. And then if we needed to schedule some time very close to that meeting, I could probably do it on either side of that meeting. Otherwise, it would need to be the last week of July for me.
I'm not around the last week of July.
Okay. All right, so we're going to have to broaden.
Yeah. we're
So, yeah, I
gonna-
think we need to all send things.
Yeah.
All right. Just trying to skinny it down.
Yeah. So, send to Delina, your blocks are unavailable, and then she'll see if she can figure out some narrow path to get us a meeting. All right. Got master planning and visioning, budget prep, and
Ends monitoring.
ends monitoring so far.
That's way too much for a work session.
We didn't say how long the work session was going to be yet.
It's July.
No, it's probably not July, I bet. All right. Anything else under the work session? If not, we're on to setting the agenda for June 15th.
I don't think we're gonna be in a position to do number 10. Are we?
We can discuss it. It's a discussion item. Push it up on
Okay.
top in the executive session and do some of that, but maybe do even an update.
Yeah, we should definitely add it, I think, to the executive session. Then we can leave it there, and if we don't get to it, we'll just do an agenda adjustment. Move it off to because that would move it off to the July 13th meeting, if we have another month.
Are we going to add a routine agenda item on negotiations updates?
Yep, that's good. We didn't do that.
Yep.
So,
We want to do that monthly or every meeting?
Will we add, ratification on here?
on the SBAA side,
Right.
again, that's up to, it's up to you guys on where you're at with that. For the
Well, I think
June
we,
15th?
I think we need a placeholder for that.
Okay.
I think we should keep it on monthly, because it could be very, very short, but it's one thing that.
Just once a
I-
month, or?
No,
every
no, I
meeting?
mean, every meeting.
Every
I mean,
meeting.
I think just
Yep.
I don't have an objection to it, I just was asking the question for clarity.
sometimes might not have a lot to report.
Yep. That's kind of what we've done with city-school collaboration. Which,
Right, that's fair.
Are we going to talk about communications policy at next meeting?
Yes, we should
Social
do that.
media.
I meant to mention that I put an updated version in front of everybody on their table. I had Delina do it. Martin did some work with the School Board Association, and I made some additions to the document. Hopefully I captured what you were driving for, Martin, or what
Yeah, I haven't had a chance
you
to
were.
look at it.
Yeah, and I just put it there, so I'd say if people look at it, we'll add it to the June
so you want to
Meeting,
put,
too.
what, communication,
review communication guidelines. Julie, you can always just, make agenda adjustments,
Okay,
knock them all off.
got it.
Well, that's right, you're gonna be the boss person next time. This meeting will be like done in a half hour.
I'm setting the bar pretty high, though.
This is an anomaly.
So the bond bank will have our term sheets for final approval before the bond sale. They'll have them to us June 8th, so they have to go back to the bond bank June 22nd. So that would be an action item. Review bond term sheets. And the second thing is, we've got to ask Stuart about this student information system.
We'll have a recommendation on the RFP, which will have to be in action.
Yeah. I think that's a consent agenda, but it's kind of a bigger one, so.
What about the investment committee?
There'll be a communication about that,
Okay.
yeah.
so it's the bond term sheets was in action, and then.
That's definitely an action, yeah.
So not to pile on to the June 15 meeting, but
I just got busy.
the Vermont School Board Association sent out their email. I'm assuming you already got it, about the resolutions that we should probably review that and see if we have any suggestions back to them, or is that not what this group does?
Yep.
No, we
Done
do
that? Yeah.
that.
We do
We
that.
got time. I don't think we have to do it in the June meeting, but we should put it on our list.
Yeah, there's a little bit more time because I'm on that committee, so
We
I
could do that
can.
the first meeting in August.
That's not a bad retreat item if we can fit it in.
That's true.
Resolution,
Jim's mentioned it.
Retreat. Put it on the retreat now. Okay. Beautiful. Julie, you owe Elizabeth for that one.
Yeah. She's always got my back.
And when I say retreat, I mean working session.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Apparently a long working.
Don't want to hear
Yeah.
any miss.
Just got really long.
Okay. Lana, did any of that make sense? Did you get that? All right, cool, thanks. All right. Moving right along. So I joked that earlier, but I will just say it. There's a strong possibility I will have another competing thing that I cannot get out of on the 15th, but if that's the case, I'll be here, probably, worst case is late. Future agenda items, anything to discuss on future agenda items? We just pulled in, monitoring up the work session. Hearing none, we'll do the consideration of the minutes for the meeting on May 18th.
I did have one question about the minutes. Page 3, do we normally note who was opposed to a motion?
Yeah.
Maybe Elizabeth doesn't want
No, we do
her
it.
name in there, but is that normal? I'm just.
Yeah, we do that.
That is, okay.
Yeah,
We have-
All right.
we've done that in the past.
It's just that we've had such few votes.
Okay. That's it. Hearing nothing else, the minutes are approved. Consent agenda. Anything you'd like to highlight for us there?
no, I think, again, we don't have any retirements or resignations. There's some hires in here.
Yeah, what about can I ask a question about these? What about there's a couple that are over budget.
Yes.
It's just,
Yep,
I
so
have to bring
again-
it up, it's over budget.
The administrators and I, we do have hiring guidelines. I think we have a pretty strong track record in the past where we've been able to bring those in within those guidelines. We do have on a few occasions, we have some that are out, and certainly we have a couple here, one particularly, a previous employee who was with us for quite some time. Ted Godfrey is one that I will just pull off. You see him well over the targeted piece. Again, active conversation with both the administrators and the committee, but again, part of this was about, understanding the needs of the school and what's going to help advance the work that we're trying to do as a middle school and preparing kids for across the parking lot. So, we don't take these lightly. We also look at the candidate pool and who's going to help continue to do that. So I'm certainly aware of how this, mirrors up to the hiring guidelines. It's well over it, so.
Was this a new position in the budget, or that specific one, or was it replacing someone who's?
It was filling a one-year, a person who was in a one-year, hired after July 15th. So it is a result of that. And so this was a reposted position and filled, in this case, with Ted Godfrey, or being proposed to be filled with Ted Godfrey.
Yeah, I think, one observation I'd have, first of all, I think Ted is a very experienced and excellent teacher, having had some exposure to him in the past. But I think based on the conversation we had at our last meeting about adding FTEs, this is one of the areas that we need administration to pay attention to, that when we hire over budget, we also run the risk of, and we're requesting new FTEs, we run the risk of being over budget kind of in aggregate, and that often gets rolled into the next year's baseline budget. I very rarely see one-year positions that don't turn into full-time positions, and that's a long commitment too.
Sure.
With this level of experience. But with the new headcount adds, we've got, by my count, I think between what was approved in the budget and at the last meeting, about 13 FTEs that will become part of the baseline operating budget.
I mean, I think a couple things on the FTE, absolutely true around that uptick. Not all of those FTEs are associated with classroom teacher or, a salary schedule like you're seeing. And I think from my perspective, last year, if we did some of the run rate on the at or below budget, we, I think, demonstrated, I believe, a pretty strong track record. So it is a delicate balance, and I get it. This was one that I did not take lightly with the administration, but there was some strong considerations around how to continue to advance the work that we're trying to do here in the school. So, and I think, a lot of the activities, expectations, expertise, this group of folks are bringing that. When you get into specialty fields, although this is not necessarily that, but mathematics certainly is one that is not always easy, particularly when we're looking at STEM qualified people who have degrees that are either mathematics or in science that came back into education. You generally see, that level of experience or degrees higher than what you might see someone equal experience.
And when we have a teacher that has come back into our district from wherever he was, he gets, obviously he's put back on the salary schedule at a certain place, but that's all he comes to the district with in terms of, right? I'm trying to,
I'm not sure.
I guess my
So it
question
depends.
is-
So a longtime teacher or a teacher with us leaves, and let's say leaves and goes and does other credible education work, right? Where they're responsible for students and delivering a curriculum and assessing them, then that could be determined credible. And that's at the discretion of the superintendent or designee. However, there are stopgap measures in our contract that people can't come in over a certain place. So that's actually, to the board's favor, because sometimes somebody could come in with, I'm going to exaggerate, 25 years of experience, and they won't come in over, depending, I'm going to just generally, whether it's a master's or master's 30, they won't come in over either a step 10 or 11 or 12, somewhere in that range. So there are some stopgap measures that help the district. I'm not sure that that's really, necessarily correct, and also allow the individuals who might have, I'm going to exaggerate, that 25 or 30 years of experience to be still considered semi-marketable, to be able to come back into, or to make a move, right? From one school to another school, given the expertise and the desire that they may have.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess, I'm just troubled by the lack of more in-depth explanation for that big of a difference. I don't want to get into, in most cases, get into the details, but I think about, for instance, what is the makeup of the social studies teachers in the middle school? Do we have all, masters plus 30, 12 plus, et cetera? If that's the case, it would seem to me that it's harder to justify hiring another person of that level of experience. It would be best to hire a less experienced person because they have all this potential mentorship. I'm not saying, I'm just saying that this
These are all
kind of would want more explanation for why this is.
We can give you some. I
right.
mean, again, Stuart, and through our professional development and our work, particularly in social studies, this is an area that is an important, we believe, an important asset, but
Well, I also think, I know you know this, but, what's budgeted is who's in the position now. So it was a one-year position, and using the hiring criteria, the person who got the 1 year only was a lower paid employee, because if somebody looks good in that position, but it was a case in which it was determined that it would be good to reopen the shot, not just automatically put somebody in because of some needs in the school. And the best qualified candidate by the committee and so on was somebody who really knows the school, knows the system, knows and brings a lot to increasing after somebody went to the high school last year. That's how this position opened. It's not a new position. It's, a team position that's existed. And so I just want to say, like last year, and John can correct me, we hired some way above what was budgeted and some way below, and we ended up about, there were a lot more retirements, but about $250,000 to the plus. So we're trying to always balance that out with expertise that we know people can bring, but you have to understand that the budget's always set on who's in the position at that moment. So when a long-term person leaves, and we do hire a new person, which we try as much as possible, within that norm of getting the best qualified teachers to teach the children of South Burlington. And in the end, that's got to be the bottom line.
And I guess, I think, we want to have obviously very highly qualified teachers here, but if you have a cohort of teachers who are all very experienced and you don't necessarily need to hire at the time of hire the best qualified teacher if that teacher is master's plus 30, step 14, whatever. If you can bring in a very good, less experienced teacher who can learn from these
Right, and we do that. I think this is a unique situation.
Yeah, my only point is that, we want to have obviously very highly qualified teachers, but we don't always need to pay for or get hire the best qualified teacher.
No question.
And I think that
I think we've demonstrated that.
Right.
This is a particularly specific situation that we are in, and the candidate pool, that given the needs, given the candidate pool, this is, and I think I don't believe you've seen many of these where I've gone, where we're at where we are at. So there's been a fair amount of conversation around the back of this and what is needed and what work is ahead. And
I think we all say this a little bit too, David, with the conversation from last week in mind about some other bubbles that you're looking at as well and watching closely.
Yep, no question.
Just because.
Again, so when you look at just how we function as a middle school, again, it's a consolidated, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And we've been able to really, from the middle school perspective, around staffing levels, they've been at kind of that core of 8 teachers for many, many years. So when you look at staffing ebbs and flows, this school has actually been probably one of the most consistent as far as staffing levels, where our elementaries, vary from 11 core in a K, 11 in for, it has that variation, which is in part some of the issues that we have. So this school has been one, obviously we have some anomalies and some specialized situations, but has been fairly steady in their FTE allocation. And we really haven't done, a lot of that significant change that way. So I get what you're saying. I understand that sensitivity. I am going to continue to figure out how we can look at, FTEs, although I don't want to go to consultant models either, right? It's about what we need to service our students given the complexities that we have. I'm very mindful of that. This is a one FTE that has a heavy weight in salary. I get that. And again, this committee has, at times I have people that say, well, we can't hire this person who would be best because it's outside the hiring guideline. And again, it's a guideline that we do want to balance best possible candidate and the ability to move things forward. So there's been there's an active conversation always around the hiring guidelines.
David, do you recall if this position took a leave of absence?
No, this was moved to the high school.
No.
Oh, you mean this
prior.
particular individual?
Yeah.
It was a leave. It was not I don't believe it was a.
It was a one-year leave and then a resignation.
Right. That's my recollection. So just for clarity's sake, since it was at your discretion on where to place the individual in the salary schedule, what was the credit for the time out of the district?
He did not get, I think he left in 2013. He did get a couple years, but he didn't get all of those years. He was not in what I determined credible years since his departure.
And can I ask, is a person like this that comes back into the district, do they then have riffing rights?
No. Well, remember, when they leave, their seniority is voided, right?
That's what I wanted to know.
So even though you worked for us, I'm exaggerating again, 25 years, you left, you come back, you restart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we didn't ask to take that off of the consent agenda, right? We just had
We
questions.
probably should have,
We just
yeah.
had questions.
Well, I think there's a question there, and we've talked about not asking forward questions anymore. I know there's been some discussion of that. I know, and are we not allowed to ask questions? Because some of these things could have been asked ahead
I was
of time.
anticipating some questions, quite honestly.
But
Because
I
I
think
think-
for transparency, it's good that
Well,
we
we
have
had
this
agreed
discussion.
we were no longer going to do that because it took up time before the meeting.
But if it helps for you, these are, I would say we should not take those off. I mean, for those things that you feel are really important and you need feedback prior to the meeting, I think it's really important that you do ask the questions.
Okay.
But my concern is that this conversation could have perhaps just been done on paper, and I think that takes away the transparency of what we're doing as well on the board. So, I think the kind of question, we can give you heads up that this is something we want answered at the board meeting.
But you have it at the board meeting.
Yeah, but we should discuss.
Always good about it, yeah.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, we can make sure if we have questions that maybe even require some research or prep for you that helps you to prepare to answer the questions in the public session would be good. But yeah, I agree, getting it transparent is key.
The timing regarding filling positions is always a sensitive one. From the time contracts go out, that might drive a decision on retirement or resignation, to then the posting, and then the committee work, and then the fill, timing is always, we have not been able, I've been working harder and harder to get those out earlier. But you gotta kind of know what your budget's gonna be, or if you are gonna have a before you can do that. So there's these very conflicting timelines that happen, and that significantly changes the pool of candidates. Just because people, are needing to make, those decisions. And some of those decisions are regarding people who have asked for an extension, or 2 or 3, and then their current district says, I'm not gonna extend you anymore, so your pool changes yet again, right?
So do we know what the net retirements versus, how many retirements just generally have we had? I know last year, Stuart mentioned that we netted $250,000 as far as salary.
Well, I can find out for you. I don't know off the top of my head.
Interesting thing to know.
Yep.
Sorry.
And kind of where we are with that.
All right, lots of good discussion. Again, this is a
Yes,
consent
consent.
agenda, so if we have any objections. Consent agenda. We also have on the consent agenda the projector system.
Yes, for the high school auditorium.
Any questions on that?
Are we gonna start showing movies as like an extra theater, make a little extra money to?
But we do rent it out. That could happen. You could advertise that. It's part of the rental agreement.
An enterprise, another.
We might increase our rental for the auditorium, I don't know.
You probably increase your cleanup fees too.
Oh, nice point.
Okay, the consent agenda is passed. Accounts payable order number 44 and 45, any questions?
I guess my question is probably just one for being the newbie on the board. Like the checks for Howard Center and Belkate are of a certain size, and so we vote on those. I checked order 44 as a really big one to VHI. What's the restriction around what we vote on and what we don't vote on? And
I have the analysis, Elizabeth had asked for it. I have the analysis ready. In fact, my office did, I haven't looked at it quite yet, but what we did was we looked at checks that we pay every month that are predictable. VHI is $500,000 or more, but we know there's a health bill to VHI every month. So we looked at that. We looked at the monthly payment to SEI for our retirement contribution. So those you'll see, they're over $50,000, but they're exceptions. Now, next week, the 15th, we'll put on the superintendent's report, I think. We'll just show you what you've seen this year, the total amount of big checks, and you have that perspective. Yeah.
Well, and I look at it too, John, and the VHI, the healthcare premiums are approved in the budget
That's
in a
correct.
line item
Okay.
too, so.
Pretty much comes to the general sum total, which has already been articulated. So
Okay.
that's also in part. Where a lot of these are, like, some of the Howard Center pieces, fluctuation.
go up and
you're
down
right,
depending on how many
call
students.
those out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on the accounts payable warrants? All right. Have a motion for adjournment?
Adjourning or going into
Oh, yes.
executive session?
Thank you, we have that. Yes, we have a motion to go into executive session. Hang on. For the purpose of discussing superintendent evaluation, where premature general public knowledge would clearly place the board at a substantial disadvantage. So,
Seconded.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in executive session.